Well, today's subject is Satsang, Darshan, and practicing the presence. Okay. So, Satsang, Sangha means fellowship. A group of people who have gathered together for a common purpose. It's not just a crowd of people. It's a group of people who have come together for a common purpose. Sat means truth. So a fellowship that has come together for truth. What is truth? That which exactly corresponds to reality. What is reality? Truth. A circle. Truth is the divine truth. And of course, people come together for lesser truths as well. People come together in a fellowship. And actually, in one of my books, I mentioned this, that if you want to be happy, if you want more happiness, more fulfillment in life, it is very helpful to connect to a group of like-minded people, a group of people that are interested in the things that you're interested in. And, some people go to church because they're interested in some spiritual connection. But for some people, church is antique car club. So they love antique cars, and they go and hang out with other people who are interested in antique cars, or a knitting club, or a reading club, or whatever. A group of people who are like-minded, who are because of that group energy, getting more than they would if they were only by themselves. This comes back to the principle that Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. This is the principle of magnetism, of group energy. So the Sangha means that we have a greater potential for energy awareness. And truth means that we're trying to tune into deeper levels of spiritual truth. And well, if as soon as we talk about spiritual truth, isn't that always present? Isn't God always present? Isn't the potential for attuning to the highest truths, the joy and love of God, always present? Yes. But we don't do that. We are not yet capable of that. We are distracted by the smaller, limited aspects of a much greater truth. And when we come to a spiritual fellowship and we seek to tune into something deeper, we have to understand that it's not just an intellectual process. It's a inwardly connected process. And this is the difference between religious belief and the yogi's emphasis on inner spiritual experience. If we want to experience truth, we can't just read about it and talk about it. We have to commune with it. Ultimately, we realize that we are, in our essential being, that true. And so our purpose in satsang is to, it's like going to the ocean, which is really huge, and the first day you go, you just put in your toe, if you're a little kid maybe, or maybe you don't know how to swim. So you just get your feet wet. But then you learn to swim, you learn to go out, and you can enjoy greater and greater amounts of the ocean. Spiritually, we do the same thing. Most people, when they first come to satsang, it's new. And it's not well, it may be a spiritual experience, but it's not one that they know how to consciously deepen. It's one that just happens according to their current state of consciousness and the vibrations of the group energy. But as yogis, we begin to develop conscious satsang. We want to consciously be in the presence of truth, and we want to deepen our ability to do that. There's something that Sister Gyanamata, Yoganandaji's foremost woman disciple in America, she said that whenever she was in Yogananda's presence, it was interesting, she wouldn't sit in his presence. She would only stand in his presence because it was a form of respect, but it was also an act of conscious doing. And she said something else that she did, which was that she intently listened within. She intently listened within. Now, most people, when they listen within, they hear the static of their active mind and the thoughts that are coming and going. But as we practice meditation, we begin to calm the mind. And in that calming, we begin to be able to tune into things that we weren't able to perceive previously. And the truth is that the whole spiritual path is learning to do this on deeper and deeper and deeper levels until we completely leave the limitations of the body, mind, personality that we experience most of the time, and we enter into that cosmic unlimited state. And this is really it's a flow of inner perception. And as we calm the mind, we're able to inwardly reach out and expand our sense of connectedness. And the apparatus through which we do this is the calming of the mind and the increasing awareness of the energy flow in the spine, in the heart, coming up to the spiritual eye. This mechanism is for most people invisible, and the closest that they get to it is that maybe they say they feel love, so we associate love in the heart. But most people experience human love, which is connected to human emotion. Divine love is connected to omnipresent, infinite, eternal divine love, which is absolute. It's impersonal. It has no opposite. It's not subject to the idea that God could hate anybody. Is completely the antithesis of the definition of God. God can only love us, and that's good for us. So, but we have to, in our body, mind, personality, consciousness of separateness, we have to begin to identify more and more with that omnipresent connection. And the way that we do that is we calm the mind, we increase our inner energy flow going up the spine to the spiritual eye. And all of the practices that we do are intended to increase our ability to do this. So Sister Gyanamata was listening intently. She was inwardly heart open, calmly, just as if she was meditating, inwardly reaching out and communing with the vibrational essence of the Master in that moment, and the truth that was being expressed in that Sangha, whether it was one or two people or whether it was a group of people. And when we practice this, and people do this subconsciously when you go into restaurants and various historical sites, you go in and, a haunted house. So you go to a haunted house and, ooh, this is spooky, and you might actually feel some sort of discomfort. And, when people go on pilgrimage, they go to holy sites. What makes them holy? They have vibrations that are sufficiently strong that it's a little bit easier for people to perceive them. That doesn't mean that everybody perceives it when they go to it. But these emanations of spiritual vibrations can have a positive effect in spite of a person's not being able to actually perceive it. People went to Lourdes in France for the healing waters, and many people were healed. We don't really know the backstory for each instance of healing to say, well, I can see that this person got healed because they prayed for 10 years and they were so good to others, and some preconceived notion of what would cause the waters to work for this person and not for this person. We can generally, we would say the law of karma is taking place, but we also know that strong will and deep inner attunement can nudge karma, can create what we call miracles or things that stand beyond the normal routine of what would have happened. And so and we know from everything that we do, when we consciously do something, when we give it our full attention, more happens. If you're studying some materials and you're not concentrating, it's different than if you're really concentrating. In both cases, you're studying the materials, it's the same. But the effect is different. So when we come to satsang, when we come consciously into that atmosphere and consciously calm the mind, open the heart, and enter into a communion with the truth of that moment. This is satsang. And when people come to group activities, even if they're spiritual activities, if they're, there's chanting and discourse, people don't always get something from it. Some people stand up and walk out. People met Yogananda and just thought he was a friendly guy. He had no perception of spiritual presence because they weren't open, they weren't capable of tuning into those frequencies, those vibrations. So, I mean, when I came to Ananda, it was my first opportunity to really be in that environment on a regular basis. And in that experience, I got to practice how to be in satsang, how to be inwardly attuned to the truth of this moment, which is maybe what's being talked about, maybe the outward thing that's taking place, but almost always on a deeper level, what it's connected to underneath the surface. And there's so much that we can get from this inner attunement, but it takes us being quiet, mentally quiet, and open in spirit, and basically in humble, loving student mode. We just have to be inwardly open to receiving the truth of the moment. And as soon as we get our egos up, then we separate from that. Now, oftentimes when people go to satsang, and if they're fortunate, there may be a saint present. There may be somebody who's got strong vibrations. And Darshan is the blessing of being in the presence of a saint. So, not everybody who's in the presence of a saint gets Darshan. Well, Darshan that they can perceive. I think that I'm not speaking fact here, but I would say that just being in the presence of a divine being does have a positive effect on you, whether you can perceive it or not. But if you're drawing on it consciously, makes a huge difference. And we can use the example of Jesus walking through the crowd and the woman touching him, and he stopped and said, "Who has touched me? I felt the power go out." So she was consciously drawing on that divine presence, and he perceived it going out. He didn't, was interesting, according to the story as we received it, he didn't know that she was going to touch him. He wasn't thinking, well, here it comes, okay, and it was a spontaneous expression of the divine. And in Darshan, we are in a very fluid circumstance. We're in a circumstance that will adjust to our ability to draw. Because the divine never imposes the blessing on others. That we have to inwardly open ourselves up to it. So when we talk about Darshan, we want to recognize that in the presence of a saint, there is an opportunity to draw more spiritual blessing than when there's nobody physically present. Now, theoretically, the divine presence is always there, so we should be capable of tuning into the consciousness of the saints from a distance. And this is true. When you pray to a master and you're tuning into them, you actually can, in spirit, in heart, in our inner center, which is connected to the center of all, we can come into the presence, the spiritual presence of the master. And this becomes darshan. This becomes, you're in the presence. And if you're really in the presence, like Master in Srukteshwar, even after Srukteshwar's passing, he materialized body. That's a very extreme. And they say the disciples actually saw Jesus. And he said, "Don't touch me. I haven't fully ascended." So they could see his body. And this is a deep spiritual blessing, of course, in an extreme situation like that. But it's a blessing that we can draw and that we should practice every single day when we pray to the masters. It's not just punching in the clock of prayer. It's actually tuning into their presence. And when we practice Kriya, anytime we think of it really, we should invite the master to meditate with us and to consciously practice being in the presence. We have to practice the presence. Practice the purpose and goal. If you go to a satsang and you never feel inwardly connected, you did not go to satsang. You were just with a group of people. You never achieve satsang until you feel touched in some way. And then you want to go deeper. Not only do you feel the peace and the connectedness of the group, but you feel a special blessing. That's darshan. And then we want to realize that all of life has this potential. We want to realize that we can practice the presence of the masters. We can practice the presence, as Sister Gyanamata did, by inwardly reaching out and opening up consciously to that presence. Master said that a sister was so in tune with him that as soon as he had a thought, he would then almost, within a shorter amount of time than she could have been notified and then written, he would just receive a note. She'd already picked up on that thought. It was already in work, in the process. So that the Swamiji used to tell the story of a time when he was planning on coming to India, and this was in the early 70s, and his car broke down. And it wasn't fixable. He had to get a new used car. And so, but the money that he had to spend on the car was for India. So he said, "Divine Mother, if you want me to go to India, you're going to have to replace this money." Now, this was like on a Friday. On Monday, he received a check in the mail, and it said, "Use this as Divine Mother would want you to." So now, the thing is that check couldn't have, it had to be, it was sent before. It was sent, the universe knew what was going to happen. The universe, God is, running ahead in front of us, going, "Now, come on, you want to go?" connect, connect. And when we pass without noticing, he runs up ahead and goes, now. We have no idea how many opportunities we miss. And it's not because God isn't trying to help us, it's because we aren't fully yet capable of recognizing that presence. This we practice. The deeper we go into meditation, the more we practice it together, the more time we spend in that, the easier it is to perceive it, the easier it is to get there again, and the easier it is to go deeper and deeper into it. When we practice the presence, we often associate that with a japa, repeating a mantra or God's name or a chant over and over during the day. But it's not just that. Yes, those acts and vibrations of the words and chants are good, but it is just getting into, one is going deeply into that feeling of connection, and then the practicing of holding on to it and living in it more and more. This is one of the reasons why we emphasize in the morning when we meditate, after we get up, we want to hold on to the vibration of our meditation for as long as we can. And Master said, live at the spiritual eye. Come down to eat and talk as necessary, but then go right there. What he means by living at the spiritual eye is living in this inner heart, spine, spiritual eye connection. And of course, the more advanced you are, the more it's centered here at the spiritual eye, but it's the heart spiritual eye. It's not just the spiritual eye. They're not separate. And when we live in that consciousness, Swamiji was amazing in so many ways. And he did it so naturally that I think many people really didn't. I mean, they knew. I mean, he would come into a room and people would somehow notice him. So he had a charisma, magnetism. But it was really dramatically deep, and sometimes you couldn't see it unless you saw some moment of difference, which was not very common. In 2004, in December, I came to India and to see Swami, and he had just purchased a home in Gurgaon, and they were moving some carpets in to see what they would look like. We carried them, all a bunch of guys, we carried the carpets over to the new house, and we put them on the ground. And I had never been there, and Swamiji was kind of giving a tour, and this really terrible thing happened. He tripped over a roll of carpeting and basically did a Superman down to the marble ground and hit his head. And it was just shocking. And we helped him to a chair, and he had a bathrobe on. And he was sitting in the chair, and I was just right at his feet, and a couple of the ladies were there, and it was like, "You okay?" And it was shocking, physically, and he had a bump on his head. He hit his forehead. I saw him go out, his arms went out, and I think he really protected himself incredibly well. But there was a moment when he was just completely thrown into the physical experience of being in the body. And I was looking right at him. He was looking at me, and he was like an old man. It's like an old man in a worn out body. And it was the only time, or the most extreme example of him being a body and not a spirit. And then the thing is that what happened that was so interesting to me was that I saw him come out of that physicality, old man consciousness, and he reasserted his spirit into his form. And you could see, this is just my view of my experience, but I could see him expanding out and being fully consciousness present. And it was an incredibly dramatic example of this sense of inwardly reaching out and being fully present. And people are locked in. And because he had withdrawn so far because of the fall, I got to watch him reassert his natural state of his aura reached out, his sense of larger presence reached out, and this is something that we have to practice. And it was so dramatic to me. He says we have to practice this inward reaching out, and when we practice this inward reaching out, which was what Sister was doing in Master's presence, and apparently all the time, since she received his messages before he even sent them. So Satsang helps us develop this. Darshan deepens it, and then practicing it all the time, so that we begin at some point, we will live in Satsang Darshan. We want to live in Darshan. We want to live in this sense that God is present and that God is blessing that presence. That God is present, and that everything that is transpiring is a blessing. And the more we live in that consciousness, the happier we're going to be.